Teresa,
Yeah.
just to let you know, it stopped.
Oh.
Yeah. It is. It is 6:30 for the planning commission meeting, and we have three people here, which gives us a quorum. So we call it to order, and we'll do attendance. Mr. Brian Thaler. Present. Ms. Teresa Newton.
Present.
Ed Cubey. Not present. And Tony Williams. Not present. James Snyder, so that gives us our three. Okay. We stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I'm doing this because I can't stand up right now. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So next we have to adopt or amend the agenda. Has everybody had a chance to look at it? Any additions? All right. So we vote to adopt the agenda. Is this a roll call vote or? So do we need a motion or we just?
Motion to approve the agenda.
Thank you, Teresa. Do we have a second?
Motion seconded.
Okay. Voting Teresa?
Yes.
Brian?
Yes.
And myself, yes. Okay, that being done. Now we go to, oh, I'm sorry, I went too far. We have no public here and no one has signed up to comment. We will go by that. Now approval of minutes, section F. Are there any additions to the minutes, changes? Do I have a motion to accept the minutes as written?
So.
Do I have a second?
Motion seconded.
And a vote. Teresa?
Yes.
Brian?
Yes.
Snyder? Yes. Now we get to old business. Discussion regarding the overlay district for Mineral Avenue and portions of Louisa Avenue and First Street. We sent, let me get to the right place here. We sent a copy of the proposed overlay district up to the council, and the first they pretty much said that was just way too much money to spend, which leaves us with one option is to, I see it, I don't know, to work on that ourselves and begin with gathering information and building out an overlay district. I feel certain that we could get help as to what it needs to be from the professional staff. And so I'm open to any suggestions or comments or.
Somebody is going to have to set up meetings with individuals And, we need to get together on that at a later date to find out who we need to talk to and who's going to either come here and present something, or one of us can go with them and get layouts.
Mhm. I'm thinking of the work that was done by the group led by Brian on the CIP. And I think that would be a format that would work for us to not do it as a whole group, but maybe appoint some people to work on that, pull in members of the group, but lay out the path to completion, and then call on us to help as needed.
Yeah, build on it from ground zero.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Uh,
but that's gonna have to be at a later date. I don't know, um, how long Ed is gonna be gone on this leg of his adventure.
I understand.
Um, and then, of course, Tony's not here. And I wasn't able to go to, the meeting on the 8th because I had an illness, but, it might be that a couple of us get together or all of us get together, and just talk about what do we have? You know, what aspects of this layout can we do ourselves? Like who can make the phone calls, who can set the appointments up or whatever, who can have a segment, I'm thinking the word, I'm sorry, I'm bad on words. Just a layout of how, you know, step one needs to be this, 2, 3, 4, 5, and give us the amount of time needed between each presentation that we have to have.
I think that, and I think that it's a system that we can set up a group to work on this and just go slowly, and we can pick up speed as some of the other things come off the workload. Uh, certainly, we want to include Ed and Tony, but I think we could start this process, be it slowly. And then part of that discussion would need to be with our zoning administrator, and
Yeah, we'll have to present certain things to the zoning administrator, and then we'll have to be before the council.
so it's a ways away before we can talk to the council about it. But the overlay district is something that I think we should move forward with.
I think we can do a lot of it, but I don't know how much that we can do, because I don't know what you can do or Brian can do. I know what I can do.
I get the summer off.
Oh, you have plenty of time. Like I've been in sales and I've done analytical work, so I can come up with budgets, or I could come up with timeframes, because I know that from construction. And so that I'm familiar with, and also the I used to know all the ADA. Because that, you know, we've got to think about that as well, because there's a lot of handicap. I'm sorry for the term, I don't know what people use up here. But the ADA requirements and sidewalks and stuff like that, and there's just a lot of things I know about from the construction of the elevators.
Okay. Brian, do you have any thoughts on this?
I think I do agree with Teresa on that. I think we should wait for Ed before we move forward, but I do think that it would be a smart idea to try and have sort of a preliminary schedule for that first meeting. So that way we can gather together and determine the next course of action based on that list, like you discussed.
Right.
I think that's a good idea, especially since you did say too that, you know, your summer is free. It would make,
And it stops being free August 1st.
exactly. It makes a good window for us to start work on this, and I think that preliminary stage and having that kind of set standard is a good place for us to start.
So what I'm going to propose is that we look at what, and we talk with the zoning administrator, and we gather whatever data we think we might need. If we don't need it, it's not going to hurt us. And if we have it in hand, once we formally get to it, I don't know if formally is the right word, but once we've got everybody here, we're prepared to move forward.
I think, Ed had mentioned something about, the zoning at the last meeting. He said there was some verbiage that was, added to, not the square footage, but the zoning for the light commercial.
That's,
I didn't know whether, I don't remember whether he wanted that done first above everything, or if we tabled it. I don't remember that from the meeting, I'm sorry.
That's number 3 on the agenda next, so.
that's a different item on the agenda. My thought is, since we sent it to council with the hopes that they would say yes, and they did not say yes, then we need to move forward. So
I think what, this is my thought on this, I think we need to make sure that we have zoning in place before the overlay is pictured in our minds as to what we want to do. Because if the zoning's not in place, that means there's gonna be a lot of headaches.
What zoning is currently not in place?
If
I think she's been gesturing at me. And I would have called on you, but all of a sudden your name dropped out of my head. And I don't want to go, would the zoning administrator like to talk to us?
like the difference in square footage of the lots and stuff, because we talked about that extensively at the last meeting.
So until we do some type of ordinance language change, the ordinance stand as they are. So if
Right.
you guys want to come up with language, because there's a zoning district that has language that you want to edit, like we're going to go over a language that I'm going to present. And if you want to vote on it and push it up to council, and then council votes whether they accept the language or they deny the language. That can happen if you decide that you want language, but we extensively went through all of the zoning districts a year ago to go over the square footage of the lot. So I think that took care of itself, but if there is some in there that need to be addressed, we can address them. Going back to a historic overlay district, there are towns, specifically Orange is a good one, for example. They have a historic overlay district that they use, they created themselves. And what you do with those are you get ideas of how things in nature work for the town of Mineral. What they look like, how you want to preserve them, what you want the exteriors to look like, how you want the streets to be assembled, and what you want those to look like. That's the overlay district. We have these two areas in Mineral that we are considering our overlay districts, that we want to preserve them. And when we say that, what do we want them to look like? Do we want them to have old street lights? Do we want them to have the old town feel? Do we want them to have specific awnings on the buildings? So those are the things that you put in a historic overlay district. It's more about the exterior look and then what is allowed to be built in these districts and how you want them to look and feel and how big they are and all that. So that's your district. And there are several districts that are written out there that really other towns take and they just mold them into their own. They get all their ideas from these individuals or these towns that have already done this, and they start molding them into their own. Also looking at their comprehensive plan and making sure that it fits the needs of the comprehensive plan. So I think it's a matter of like just pulling all of our brains together and going through a couple overlay districts and saying, well, yeah, we want the town mineral to look like A, B, and C. We also want to add, you know, these other attributes to this. And then you just start creating. You have a section for streets, a section for buildings, a section for awnings, a section for lights, a section for sidewalks. What do you want? You know, do you want the curves to look like? Do you want the flowers? Do you want flowers at each corner of the sidewalk? Like these are things that you put in for these buildings. Do you want the buildings to maintain some type of curved appeal? And what do you want that to look like? Because it is your overlay district and you get to decide that.
Which means we need to go out and look.
Go out and look and look at other overlay districts in other towns and their ordinance and code. Gordonsville, I'm sure has one, but it's not, I don't know if it's online. There's just at their town hall. Orange has one, it's online.
So I guess at this point, we need to make some decisions about whether we table this and spoil my summer, or we go ahead and get started in some small, modest way that doesn't involve making decisions, but just getting information.
Well, what we can do until I'm in agreement with, we need to table this, but we can also go to these towns, take pictures of things that we like and start working on the design that we want for the town. And then have a hand ready, but when you're finished, And from that point, then we have a vision to look at and go from there. That's what I think.
I think you misunderstood.
Okay,
When I say table, I mean we do nothing.
well, that's what I
And then
said.
when I say we should move forward in some manner, is that we should go ahead and formalize that and start doing something, however small, but start doing it.
Well, table it until the next meeting.
That's what you'd like to do.
That's what I had said before I got into the details.
Okay,
We need to individually come up with something. Do we want to draw those people in? What design do we want? It's like Nicole said. So I think that we can think about those things, talk about it at the next meeting, and then go forward from there. Because we can talk about the design and give us a vision.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to address you as the historic foundation.
Sure.
If that is acceptable to the commission. So I think a great starting point, I agree with you, that if you were to start tonight, you'd just be grasping at straws, right? I think a great starting point might be to have the historic foundation for the town of Mineral come in and go over what the historic district is. Kind of point out what the historic structures are, because the point of the historic district overlay is to protect what is contributing to its historical relevance. So without knowing that, where do you start?
That's what I'm saying.
So I have a huge presentation I can do for you guys. I'll try to narrow it down to be a one meeting thing, but when you get me started on the history of this town, you might not get me stopped. It'd be like stopping that train. So if you'd like, for the next meeting, I can be prepared to kind of go over that with you all as the historic foundation, not as the liaison.
That's fine with me, and then that way, with the ideas that we bring forward at the next meeting of what we think it ought to be. Then we can intertwine that with you and what you're saying, and then that way at least we have a vision. Because we don't have a vision, people have to have visions, and if we present it to the town and we don't have that vision in front of them, they're not gonna be excited about it. that people. That's the way I look at it, I guess, because,
I look at it differently. yeah.
well, I look at it from a standpoint. 95% of the people that I see that go into homes that are empty. They do not have a vision of how they don't know anything about what they're gonna do in that house that they just bought. I've seen it so many times, and even the men are included in that. It's not just the wives. They just don't have just can't see beyond that empty room. It's always been like that in real estate. So I'm basing it on past experiences.
So we have potential for two different proposals. Do you have a motion for what you'd like us to do?
Or with the attorney's advice, because I don't remember how to write up those spreadsheets and all.
No, it's simply,
I make a motion to table to the next meeting, our first. Vision. The vision of our overlay. And let the mayor, intertwine with what we present at that meeting.
do we have a second?
Yeah, I second that motion.
Let's go to a vote then.
Yes.
Yes.
No. It carries 2-1. Under old business, number 2. A discussion regarding zoning signage. This goes back to some stuff that was brought forward at our last meeting about, and you could even go back to the minutes about people wanting to have some kind of signage that say something to talk about and to inform them about what was going on with all the trees getting cut down next door. The council talked about it, and please correct me if I've got this wrong. Part of it was seen as a need to not be nosy, but to be aware of everything that's going on. And one response was, and if I build a house, it's nobody's business. If it's a by right activity, there's nothing to be said about whether it can go forward. If it's a change in zoning, we have to advertise that. We have to put notices up on the door, put it in the paper. We have a public meeting. In some locations, they put a yard sign. A zoning proposition is, or a meeting regarding zoning for this, just to inform the public that drives by. That's different than, what's happening over there? We discussed this the other day and maybe there was a place for informational things that are not just a house being built, but this road is being opened so that, and just to let people know, but there are two different issues here. So what I think we should do, this is my thoughts, is that we should look to or ask our zoning administrator about what signage, what language is needed to add a zoning sign, to make that part of our practice. Any discussion of that step?
In discussion, do you mean, are we able to
Yeah.
address the zoning
Y-
administrator as
yeah.
well?
Mhm.
Mrs. Washington, my first question is, what specifically is required for zoning signage when there's some sort of a change that requires it per the county requirements for zoning? Is to specify a little bit more clearly, is that I'm assuming, just from my own layman's understanding, that a zone is a specified area that is potentially going to change versus something that's a specific action that's happening on a property or a specific building or modification to a building. Would you be able to explain that a little bit
Yeah.
for us?
So at the back of the room is our zoning map for the town of Mineral. That map shows all of our zones, it's color coded. If someone purchased property and in the light commercial district and they decided that they wanted to rezone part of it to general commercial because there was a piece of land that was available and general commercial requires what they want to build or put there requires it to be general commercial, so. Then we would do a rezoning and a zoning sign would go out, but there would be a public hearing for the zone district. At that time, we would then advertise and it would be a presentation of what the parcel is now, what the current zoning district permits are, what permitted uses are. And then what the rezoning attributes are, what they want to rezone it to and what those permitted uses are.
And that would come to the planning commission and then recommendations be made to the council.
And I would do a presentation to both planning commission. And then take the recommendation from planning commission to council and do the same presentation. Letting council know the recommendation from planning commission.
Okay, so, do they fill out applications here in town?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the minute they fill out the application and pay a fee, then you've got it and you notify the planning commission so they can bring it in as new business, is that correct?
Yeah, so we would put it on the calendar once everything was looked at. This is
Right.
strictly for rezoning, not for any development, only if it considers a rezoning.
Right.
There is an application for subdivisions and developments that also would be a presentation. So if it is a rezoning, it's rezoning signage is what we would do. And the application would come, I would review it. If it meets all the requirements under the ordinance that it wants to be rezoned as, then it would get approved and we move to planning commission.
Okay, so how would you work it if somebody came in 3 days before the council meeting and then 5 days for the commission? Then you'd set it up for the next month, is that correct?
I mean, you have to follow the schedule, it just depends, like,
Yeah, I don't know how y'all do.
well, so I wouldn't throw it on, there's a process that we do for all of our agendas. So there's a time frame, if it comes in and it's not ready by the time the materials are due for the agenda, then it doesn't go.
Okay.
It goes to the next meeting,
Okay,
so it'll never go to council until it goes to planning commission.
okay.
You mentioned development, which is not a rezoning, but it also requires planning commission involvement.
Yeah.
Could you speak to that, please?
So for example, one of the major areas that we have in our town is the PUD, which is the green section on our zoning map in the back. If that, gets done and moved forward, they've already been up for a meeting. It was approved somewhat, their narrative and what they wanted to do was approved back in 2007. As a district, so the PUD's district was approved to this narrative as to what it would be. But let's say that hadn't happened. They would fill out an application, we would get all of their information, site plans, etc. And it would come to planning commission and there would be a public hearing and there would be information that went on. In the PUD, it talks about the different zoning districts that are allowed in the PUD and what the PUD would be. There is a concept plan for the PUD. And if I'm correct, we would have to do rezonings within the PUD section to show on our map that this section in the PUD is residential, this section in the PUD is commercial, this section in the PUD is, light commercial. So we would, if that's the way that the development would stand, because once the developer puts the concept plan in place, and the rezoning takes effect to say, yes, this section is residential, this section is general commercial, that allows builders and developers to come in and work with the person that owns that land to develop on the property. We would have to know what zoning district those parcels were in order to be able to follow for building out the property. So there's a whole bunch of steps that relate to a PUD district.
You had also talked about a development in terms of a property with you said there was a limit of like three, once you start to put three houses over there, it requires a bit more.
Yeah, more than three requires a little bit more. It becomes a development, and when you can't access your property off of roads, but you have to create a private driveway, that would come, I would bring that to planning commission and to council to show the nature of what's happening. For example, I had a few inquiries about West Third Street. There were some parcels over there. And there's an abandoned house at the end of West Third Street that they used West Third Street as the driveway to get to the house. The property lines right at that driveway. So I had some inquiries about that, and several things. Someone wanted to put two houses, someone wanted to put cottages, someone wanted to put townhomes. So there's different things to do. These would come to planning commission council, because once we start creating private driveways to access multiple houses, it has to be something that is approved in the town. That's the way I would handle it. If someone wanted to do townhomes, that's considered multifamily, so that would have to go through approval. And that includes a whole list of things that they would have to do. In that zoning district, the playground, the way they look, etc. So, in all of these, anything that is done with a conditional use permit, means that the council planning commission get to implement conditions. Or say to someone, well, we would like to see more of, or we're thinking more of this, and then those applicants would bring condition suggestions to what is needed. If we needed more trees on a tree line, because it's multifamily, if we need, like, depending on what it is, so those are condition based and would have to be monitored and approved.
All of those potentially could be a place where we put a zoning signage out to say that something's happening with this property that,
Doesn't change zoning.
no, it doesn't. But if there's going to be a conditional use permit, would there not also be public hearings? So I'm trying to figure out
How to notify everyone.
how to notify, because some people want those signs in somebody's yard.
So we could do zoning sign for zoning changes. We could also create a public hearing sign that whenever a property has a public hearing, we could just put the sign out saying that there's a public hearing.
I think that would get in front of, I don't know what's going on.
We could have two signs. We could do zoning. We could actually make one sign and say zoning, public hearing. And that way it's just based on that there is a public hearing. Doesn't matter if it's a rezoning is really when you do a major zoning sign, but and rezonings always require a public hearing. But because subdivisions and developments require sometimes rezonings, is why they have public hearings, but we can do public hearings.
So,
We could do zoning / public hearing and make it one sign, and we use those signs to put out whenever we have a public hearing on property.
would this need to be added to code or
Yes, I'll look at what Louisa does because they do have it as an ordinance,
okay.
thanks to my clerk.
So here's my question. Because we haven't gotten to the point of voting to recommend this, but once you do that, does that need to come back to us or does that just go?
Yeah, back to you, for you to look at the language and accept that's what you would like for it to say. You recommend whatever you need to recommend to go out to council, and then we move it to council, and then council gets to vote on language.
Ron,
Yes.
since I'm standing here with the big stick, am I allowed to make a motion?
Yeah, because you are the vice chair sitting in chair.
Got it. I move that the planning commission asks the zoning administrator to develop language that covers the, okay, the word just went, that covers the situations we just discussed. Informational signs that cover zoning or other things that require a public meeting.
I second it. I second
Okay,
it.
okay, now we vote.
Before we vote, may I ask
Yes.
one more question?
Sure.
When you're talking about the signs, just for my own clarification, are you talking about like a universal sign that would move from property to property or, oh, okay, so it would be like, this is a property that's currently. And it would just, everybody knows that that is under a zoning change and to like see more info in town hall.
Yes.
Okay, good.
And we'll get a couple of those, depending on if this gets approved, I'm sure we'll get a couple of the yard signs, and so that we'll have, if we have two or, more than one development on. We're small, so.
Yeah, they're usually 3 feet.
Depends on how much you cut up the coroplast.
That'd be visible from the car.
We had some for beautification, that's what size they are. Yard signs.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, and Ron, that was an okay, never mind. Shall we vote? Teresa?
Yes. Yes, on the signage for
Yes,
zoning. Or
Language.
yeah, we gotta have that language from the attorney.
Fine.
okay, yes.
Yes. Now. Yes,
Go back just 1 second to historic overlay, just so I can show you guys an example.
sure.
So this is an ordinance for Barboursville, which is a historic overlay district in Orange. And in this ordinance, you'll see pictures. And it talks about buildings, it talks about the style of building, it talks about what all they would like to see in their historic district. So this is what I was talking about when I say you get to pick out the different things that you accept in your historic overlay. So lights, lanterns, off-street parking and landscape, and then where your historic overlay district is. What signage is allowed in the historic overlay district. So these are the things that we're talking about. We're talking about the houses or the buildings, awnings, landscape, all of that stuff. And it really is just working and figuring out what, as a group, you want to see and what it means in the town for the historic. So with the historic foundation, we'll have all of that information that will help build some of the like visual aspects, and then the language to go along with it.
Is that orange or is that Bartlesville?
It's Bartlesville's in Orange, so it's Orange County's
Okay,
Bartlesville Village District, which is historic overlay district for that.
Can you send that out through our emails, that
Yeah,
link? And any others that you think we ought to look at?
If I may, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
So I have basically the same thing for the town of Mineral. Gaynell Whitlock many, many years ago had started the process of putting all this together. And we inherited that, when we took over the foundation 5 years, feels like 55 years ago, 5 years ago. So I have a lot of this already written up in a binder that I'll make copies and provide, next month. So we're not starting from scratch.
Thank you.
Gaynell did a lot of that work.
I know gay now.
Mm-hmm.
and then that way we'll go with Ed too.
Right, yeah, and I believe Ed and Bernice both have a copy of it as well.
Okay.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Washington, whose name I just remembered. Going to our next discussion regarding light zoning classification permitted uses. I think you wanted to talk to us about that?
yes, so there was. I got a motion to change some language. In a light commercial district, there was discussion about, single family homes being in like commercial district. And confusion about how that language got into like commercial district, that language was entered in the like commercial district ordinance through a vote of council. And it was approved through council and adopted that way. So planning commission members wanted to maybe address single family dwellings. I think there is a notion that there's not a need to have single family dwelling, in the light commercial district. What I can tell you just historically is that a lot of our light commercial district are homes that are turned into businesses, which is great. And a lot of our businesses are on Mineral Avenue. I understand that too. But there are sections of Mineral Avenue blocks that are fully just single family homes. And so in creating this new language, I took that into consideration because one, when you take single family homes out of light commercial ordinance, you're saying that those homes now are not, and they would be able to do anything to their house. So we talked a little bit about that. You're also saying that everything like commercial can only be businesses when some of the like commercial districts are on back streets, secondary streets, what we call from our main street. And those secondary streets are surrounded by family homes and children. Not a lot of parking, no parking lots, etc. So I took and went about this in creating language that would address the main road and allow for single family development on the secondary roads. With understanding that if someone came in and wanted to create a business on the secondary road, they could do that. But a lot of businesses, those businesses are more not retailish. They're more, like Mr. Loudon has his business back there. He works Monday through Friday. It is his office and his garage back there. So those types of businesses are not retail oriented, have a lot of traffic, etc. So the language I put in for permitted uses taught as number 2 says single family dwellings only when the location is not on an avenue, which means this is a permitted use allowing for single family homes. When the location is not on Mineral Avenue, which is the main corridor in the town of Mineral, No single family homes are permitted by new construction on Mineral Ave. Single family homes that exist are not considered non-conforming and shall be allowed to expand their footprint as long as zoning setbacks are met. The other thing I'd like to talk about is that homes that are on, in light commercial, that can be businesses, they would file a change of use permit, because when you're residential, you're required by the building department to have certain things, and when you're a business, you're required by the building department to have a different set of rules. So we would implement this change of use. A change of use means that you're taking a house and you're making it a business. You're taking a business and you're making it something else. The daycare lead example, Mad Batter's gone, they left. Mad Batter will get rented out to another business. They'll have to file a change of use, because that change of use for zoning goes to the building department. And if they come in and want to be a sports bar, or they want to be a cafe, or they want to be a smoothie shop, they have to make sure that they have stuff that's set up to accommodate the rules for that business. There are building codes that go around it. If they decide to be a sports bar, they have to have, and they're doing fried food, not air fried food, they have to have a suppression system for fire. So there's lots of things that happen. So that's something that the town has not focused on. That is very important, because we do have several businesses that have taken over other businesses and have not done change of use. And I'm sure the building department has been down here, because they may have to get a zoning permit if they're doing something in the building. The daycare had to come and get a zoning permit, so they made sure the daycare was up to par with all state and local building codes. So I just wanna make it formal, and that way we have that documentation going forward for this. The other piece that I edited in light commercial was just minor, because we had talked about it a long time ago, it did not get entered the first time, I believe, was the minimum side yard setback into a residential dwelling and or district shall not be less than 20 feet. But if the existing house is on Mineral Avenue, the side yard should blend with the existing setbacks. This is to keep the feel of small town if the house were to ever change uses to become business. So in our general commercial district, we have said that our businesses right here on Mineral Avenue, Mineral Mercantile, empty lot builds a business, and then Blue Building beside it, they're not gonna have a minimum side yard, because we want them close together, their businesses. They're gonna have it fire rated, they're gonna be fire rate protected, the building department's gonna make sure that happens. But if in the event on Mineral Avenue, houses and homes get sold to businesses, and they can expand their business, or they can build something in that empty lot, we want them to be able to do that without restricting them to do so on our main street. This over here,
I'm
so
just,
from Blue Building on is general commercial,
right.
and down Louisa is general commercial, but our light commercial district doesn't have that language. And so light commercial district is all the way down Mineral Avenue,
Now,
pink,
yep, pink, and then,
orange is general.
right. That's back here.
Yep, and then.
I like what you're saying, that infill, if, as opposed to keeping a side yard.
For businesses and for Main Street, does not affect secondary or where residential is. Because when you start doing that, which is in my own opinion, you're starting to create a little more chaos for, the residents that live in those areas on those back roads. So this is just for Mineral Avenue. As you get more businesses, as we grow, Mineral Avenue, maybe someone sells their house, a company buys it, and it comes with land. Right?
Right.
You're gonna wanna expand that business, maybe create a couple storefronts, because they can. They're allowed to. But what do their setbacks look like? If we put setback restriction on them, then we're not allowing businesses to come on Mineral Avenue and build up our small town.
So I'm thinking of the house over here, the Sparks Electric,
Yeah.
that has a parking lot.
Sparks.
Sparks Electric?
Yeah, that's they use that
Hmm.
in the building.
So if they didn't need to use it for parking, they could storefront.
Yes.
That would solve the problem of big side yards.
Well, I don't, well, that's something that we're going to have to look at as far as parking is concerned in town. I mean, you've got the parking down the side, but if we're going to really work hard to fill this up with light commercial and general commercial, you're gonna have to have parking somewhere.
Well, and they would have parking in the back of their stores or in the front of their stores. There's enough room down in light commercial. There's not a lot of room in general.
Right.
But there's enough room in light commercial where you can create parking spots. There's a piece of property that is residential, but if it ever were sold, it's big enough space that they could create a parking. But I would hate to see, and so the other thing that we think about, it's not in here, I think it needs to be addressed. If those houses are on Mineral Avenue, like there's 2 or 3, well, 14 now. That have been here, those houses are not non-conforming, they stay as a house, if something were to happen to those houses. Would you allow for that house to be built back as a home? And I think that is language that we need to address and put it in here, and I didn't put it in here. But it should be addressed because there are homes on Mineral Avenue that people live in. I myself live one, I have neighbors. And that if something were to happen to the homes, burn up, catch on fire, whatever, would we allow them to build their house back to live in as a home? I would assume we would, but I think language needs to be put in there to cover that.
Well,
Because
I
20 years
don't
from
think
now,
it's lawful for us to tell him he can't build his house on his property.
I agree with you, and I don't know the law on that, but
That's
I'm
an
saying,
attorney question.
but I'm saying for the town to protect that, we could go the extra step to say that in our ordinance.
That makes
I
sense.
suggest that you we get the attorney on that to cover.
Well, you're as a town, you can create your own ordinance, it's
I
your
know, but
law.
I'm against somebody not being able to.
Well, I mean.
I wasn't.
That's what we're saying is if, God forbid, Ron's house burns down,
Oh, see that?
it was either you or your neighbor.
Oh,
They should be able to come back. Yeah,
I've just never seen that.
well, it has happened. It
I'm not
has,
saying it hasn't, I am not.
and it is language that, towns have started to put in.
so what would it take to add that language?
Oh, we could just add it.
But it still has to be written by the attorney. I mean, he's got to give us the language.
He
So-
doesn't though.
We can do the
Doesn't?
language.
No,
I'll find somebody to help us with it.
I think there seems to be a lot of focus
Hold
on
on.
the language from the
So
attorney.
the language gets developed here,
Yes,
and then I work with the attorney to review the language. And then it comes back and it says, do you all accept this language? Or if it's already approved from the attorney, it goes to council. You develop your language, you're the town, you develop your language, your language says what you wanna say, it just can't say less than what the state of Virginia says. And the state of Virginia doesn't do zoning. So they allow the towns to do their zoning ordinances. So the attorney will look at this and review it to make sure that legally, all the wording is correct. And it's our wording, so it's what the town.
so rather than us writing the wording, which we used to do, we have you who could write the wording for us, and I'm in favor of that.
I've never seen ordinances that said that. I'm not saying that it has never happened, but I've never seen ordinances that said that.
It's putting in a little bit to protect what potentially, and we hopefully say never happens, potentially happens. And that is somebody lose their property rights because their house burns down.
Go ahead, I want to hear what you've got to say.
Mr. Chairman and Finance.
Yes.
So there's a couple of ways to slay this cat. So the district that we're talking about happens to fall squarely in the middle of the historic overlay.
Mhm.
So it is the historic residences that would be in jeopardy should they burn down if we don't protect them in this ordinance. So if we protect them in the historic overlay, Ms. Washington, correct me if I'm wrong, then we're protecting and saying, okay, so I'm gonna use your example, if my house were to burn to the ground, I have to put it back as it was historically when it was represented as part of the historic district.
Hey,
So is that, Nicole, is that kind of solving that problem if we incorporate that into the historic district?
oh, before she answers that, let me make a statement. I'm not an attorney. And I wouldn't want to be in this situation, but. If the house is under a mortgage and he's got insurance on it. And we have something that in there, if we protect them, that's fine, but even if we don't, they. We don't know how insurance companies and mortgage lenders are gonna feel about if we try to stop that. You understand what I'm saying? I
That's
mean,
exactly what we're talking about. So the reason that the language got changed from the original recommendation of the planning commission a year ago. Is because it basically said that if my house burned down, I was out of luck.
Yes,
well, I haven't heard that, so.
well,
that's
as something
the
that was
original-
For me,
That's-
it wasn't
that's
a
what
permitted
said.
use in like commercial districts, so if his house burned down. And you went to the zoning, the town could argue that he couldn't put his house back up,
so
so
it's
he
in our
couldn't use it as a home.
It's
So-
now ordinances now.
So no, so if that's what was originally presented to council and council voted to change that. So that's the language that's being asked to be amended now, take two on this ordinance. And originally, it was to put stronger language around residential construction in light commercial. So that's kind of where Ms. Washington started, was kind of putting a little bit more of a fine point, correct me if I'm wrong, on what residential uses would be permitted. But it essentially made everybody sitting at this table except you, I think you live far.
Way back in the boonies.
Yeah, but I mean, even your home would have been non-conforming if we had left it the way it was originally recommended to council. So council said, no, we're not going to do that, because that means if my house burned down, I would have to apply for conditional use in order to rebuild my house.
Well, as long as it's understood that I want to protect these property owners here.
Well, that's what
I
we're
think that they should have a conformity to the styles that we choose. That's gonna be rebuilt on their property. But I mean, I'm in agreement to protect them. But the ordinance has got to include in structural, in the construction part of it, it's gotta be. It's gotta be written in that part of it, if because it's a new build. So that's where that ordinance will come in as far as the structure being rebuilt. If I can recall how it was before, how I've seen it.
Well, and so it can, our ordinance, and I believe the word that's typically used, Nicole, in these types of ordinances is to indemnify, right? So they can build back what was there. So if you have a 2-story, Foursquare, for example. You can rebuild, you can indemnify, return to what you had, rebuild Foursquare. And that's actually an insurance company term as well. I can't then turn around and build a 4-story Queen Anne Victorian with turrets and gables. I would have to build to what was there originally.
But
Well,
would you,
like with me, I wouldn't want the second story back. I would want the same design, and larger, I mean, it would, I'm just saying, for instance, I don't want a 2-story. You know, I just want one landing, if you will. So, but if it fit in with the design of the town,
That's where the historic overlay comes.
that's where the historic overlay district comes in when a house burns down. You can allow them to build their home back, but they, because they're in historic overlay district, they can't build a mid-century modern.
Yeah, they can't put up a
That's
silk
okay.
fence.
And so, in here, we could say, you know, to refer to the historic overlay district, but we don't have one, so I can't put that in. And I'll talk to Rob about this, but I've just put some notes in this ordinance that states that, if a single family home, and it's just wordy, but if a single family home located on Mineral Avenue, it is used as a residential use, burned down or was damaged, the owner shall have the right to build a home of like nature in the same lot.
like nature.
Once we have a historic overlay district, we'll edit that to include that. This is a historic overlay district, so there will have to be. Because the houses are already encompassing in historic overlays.
Yes.
I'm
So if somebody's in a house, but using it as a business and it burns down, are they under the same guidelines for a rebuild?
You guys have.
but yes, it
We
has.
just don't
But
want to say
that would
they
be-
can't have their home.
But that would be more of historic overlay district.
That's true. So we could say in here under businesses. We could put something in here that talks about it being built. To the historic overlay district, but we don't have historic overlay districts.
So we could amend that once we do.
With like,
But you could also put for right now, if something were to happen on Mineral Avenue. That you would want the owner of that building to build something of like nature, because right now. You don't have, right now we have like, the blue building it doesn't have foundation, so. I'm pretty sure it would have to be knocked down. But the Mineral Mercantile, if something happened to that. Would you want a modern office building? Like you might wanna put something in here right now that says it would need to mimic. The natural and exterior environment of Mineral Avenue. I don't know what you put for that. Because
And
historic
so what-
overlay is what protects that.
That's what
what
we
is
need
the
to get, yeah.
verbiage for the height of a building right now?
Oh, it's like it's not over 60.
Yeah. It's too.
So that's 2 floors.
Yeah. Well, it could.
Yeah.
It could be.
Yes.
So, just to clarify, the town does have a sort of, the historic district is recognized both on the state and federal level. The town has not set an overlay, which is that thing that protects the history of the town's property. So we could potentially refer to the district. But we can't refer to what rules the district would hold when we create the overlay for that district. Because we do, by state and federal law, have a historic district.
Well, if that's the
We
case,
just haven't set any rules for that district.
Well, but because we haven't set any rules for that district, we can't implement any rules. So if someone came, because we don't have those rules, I wouldn't be able to go out to them and say, you need to follow this, or because the town itself has to monitor that. The state and local and federal.
yeah, but if you've already got a historical district we can still come up with ordinances for that.
That we
instead of a
can, I
major
just can't put it in your, I just can't put it in
Yeah,
the
I
district.
understand
Yeah,
that part of it. It would have to be worked into what is required of the historic district instead of going forward with all this overlay stuff.
Well, the overlay, so, and I'll go a little bit more into detail on this next month. For you all, for your edification, but the overlay is the benefit to the people that own properties in a historic overlay. To the tune of a 25% tax cut on their home's value. At the federal level. But it's also a huge benefit for the town, because now we're preserving history, so there's federal and state level grants. To help with sidewalks, streetlights, awnings, all of the pretty that the town wants. There is massive amounts of money available, but not until the town starts to legitimize its historic property, and that's the first step.
Okay, so.
I think,
Not the historic district, we're talking about the overlay right now, correct?
it's this,
The same
same thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Same thing.
I think we need to move forward with the question in front of us, which is, do we like this language? Are there things we want done with it? And then,
I can take this language and submit it to the attorney, have him review it, and then I can bring it back to you guys, so you can then punt it to council.
do you need a motion for that?
No, I don't need a motion for that. You can, because there was a motion. Was there a motion?
It's still under the motion from last time, and this was like the recommendation of council to send it back to you all.
So
So-
you can ask me to recommend that I take something.
We recommend that this go forward in discussion with the attorney and come back to us next month. So, and basically, we're tabling this to continue next month.
Yeah.
Does anybody really want to vote? Nope.
Well, good, but this is gonna have to be, looked at, so. Sure. But- Yes.
I'm sorry, I think there were 2 points made there. Could you clarify what you?
Okay, so we're asking, we're depending on the, we're letting the zoning administrator know that, we like these changes. I'm assuming we like these changes and that, she should vet them with the attorney and then come back to us with any changes so that we could at that point vote and recommend to the council.
Okay, so we need to table it.
Table it
Table it,
until,
we'll bring it up next month.
add it to next
After
month's
we
agenda.
adjourn. And we don't have to vote on
Yeah.
that, we're just tabling it.
Yeah, we're tabling it, and at that same time, I'll do the zoning signage, and then so we'll have 2 that we can
Okay.
recommend.
Okay.
So the next thing on our list is capital improvement plan report. I was there